In a jaw-dropping revelation, Rick Harrison's son has finally broken his silence, exposing the untold truth behind his complicated relationship with his famous father. For years, fans have followed the gold and silver pawnshop star on Pawn Stars. But what's been hidden behind the scenes? Could everything we thought we knew about the Harrison family be completely wrong? Get ready for a shocking twist that will leave you questioning everything. What do you think about the shocking truth revealed by Rick Harrison's son? Does this change the way you see the Harrison family? If you found this story shocking, leave a 1 in the comments. If you disagree or have a different opinion, feel free to share your thoughts with a 0. Enjoy the video and don't forget to hit that subscribe button to support us. Join the conversation and share your thoughts. At 9:13 a.m., social media was suddenly set ablaze. A brief piece of information, said to be an exclusive interview, spread like wildfire. There was no press release, no grand stage, just a cold, blunt, and shocking statement. Corey Harrison spoke out, and his words left fans stunned. He truly was a villain. This statement, coming at a time when his famous father, Rick Harrison, is facing a life sentence, sparked a massive wave of reactions across every platform, from Twitter and CNN to fan forums and morning talk shows. He's not the person everyone thinks he is, and I don't care if that makes anyone angry. The heavy voice of Corey Harrison echoed, the son of Rick Harrison, the former TV star and owner of the world-famous pawn shop. Rick was once the heart of Pawn Stars, the beloved reality show that drew millions of Americans with its quirky items, fascinating historical facts, and humorous father-son banter. But now, the mood has shifted. The sweet memories have turned sour, and the history that was once celebrated now feels hollow. Everything Corey had once been associated with, his smile, his handshake, the moments under the spotlight, now seemed to have turned dark. Just minutes after the interview spread, everything changed. By midday, major media outlets were reporting the news. And by evening, Pawn Stars episodes had suddenly vanished from the History Channel platforms, leaving no trace behind. From YouTube videos to online store items, thousands of longtime viewers sat staring at their DVD collections, feeling shocked, disappointed, and confused. What could have prompted a son to utter such words about his father? What secrets had never been revealed behind the glittering facade of the famous pawn shop? And what led to Rick Harrison's harsh sentence? The answer doesn't lie in the guilt he was convicted of, but in the heavy silence of Corey. A silence so profound that by the time Corey finally spoke, it was already too late. After the trial, when Rick was escorted out of the federal courtroom, cold and indifferent, Corey was nowhere to be found among the supporters at the pawn shop or on the media platforms. He quietly stayed in a downtown Los Angeles hotel alone, watching the drama unfold on the screen like millions of others. For days, he refused all contact from fans, friends, and the press. Rumors spread far and wide. Some believed he was in hiding. Others thought he was preparing for his own legal troubles. There were even whispers that he had left the country. But none of that was true. Corey Harrison was facing the collapse of something he had once considered sacred, the illusion of family. On the 5th day of silence, Corey decided to break it, but not on national television, rather in a video recorded by an independent documentary filmmaker, a trusted confidant of the Harrison family. There was no backdrop, no script, no bright lights, just a dark room, a camera, and a man ready to unveil the truths that had been buried for years. "All you see is a pawn shop," Corey said, his voice trembling, his hands unable to conceal the tension. "I've seen things that the cameras never picked up, and from that moment, there's no going back." To grasp the weight of those words, we must trace every clue, every moment. Going back in time, Rick Harrison wasn't just a businessman or a television personality. He was a living legend. He was the embodiment of resilience and the allure of Americana culture, a man who could appraise ancient coins, negotiate Civil War rifles, and make millions laugh for over a decade. Rick didn't just enter people's living rooms, he captured their hearts. He became an indispensable figure in pop culture. But behind that familiar smile and shrewd deals, there was a man with dark secrets. The secrets lay hidden behind closed doors, in cryptic ledgers and encrypted storage units that could astonish even the most seasoned investigators. It all started with scattered whispers, anonymous messages, unresolved disappearances, and strangely tampered documents. But the true turning point came when a former employee broke their silence, leading federal agents to a series of private storage lockers linked to Rick's business dealings. Inside, they didn't just find strange items, they uncovered something that left the entire investigative team stunned. Carefully preserved human remains, stored in temperature-controlled boxes, were labeled with codes and tags such as Object 004B and Collection 1997. Initially, it was thought to be a medical storage error, perhaps a forgotten collection of pathological specimens. But when notebooks began to surface, filled with detailed sketches, names, dates, and rituals, any naive theories were swiftly dismissed. The notes referred to preservation rituals, photos of celebrities, memory boxes, and DNA maps. A tone both paranoid yet precise, chilling in its detail. These artifacts weren't just collectibles, they were lives. The lives of those Rick Harrison was accused of exploiting for nefarious purposes. When the FBI raided Rick's home in Las Vegas, things took an even darker turn. Behind a false wall in the wine cellar, they discovered a secret room filled with glass jars containing bones, teeth, hair, and other items identified as belonging to missing persons over the past 20 years. But the most heartbreaking discovery was the tapes, VHS cassettes, and rolls of old film. Some tapes were labeled with dates, others just had letters. The content on these tapes sent chills down the spines of the investigators. Individuals bound, placed in strange positions, monitored, examined, and in some cases forced to converse with a man whose face was obscured, but whose voice and gestures were unmistakable: Rick Harrison. Rick, once a beloved television personality, had suddenly become the prime suspect in a series of crimes that would shock the nation. While fans still hoped this was just a terrible mistake, the evidence was undeniable, and America was forced to confront the harsh reality behind Rick's familiar smile, the face that had graced their screens for years. Corey, Rick's son, who had shared the screen with him for over a decade, spoke out not to defend his father, but to expose the truth. He didn't deny the allegations, didn't ask for time to think or plead for sympathy. Instead, Corey bluntly called his father a villain. When asked about the life sentence without parole in a maximum security facility, Corey quietly responded, "That's not enough." He admitted that he had sensed something was wrong for years, but never imagined it would be so deep and dark. Then, Corey continued with shocking confessions. "There were nights I came home with scratches on my hands and dirt on my shoes. I asked him what happened, and he said he'd been hiking or digging for ancient treasure, but came back with nothing." Corey went on to describe locked rooms in the pawn shop, where even he, a full-time member of the family business, was forbidden to enter. "He said it was a storage room," Corey recalled, "but no one ever went in there, not even the guards. Conversations would stop dead when he entered the room. Strangers showed up in the middle of the night, then vanished silently." Corey looked away from the camera, hands clenched into fists, his eyes heavy. Maybe regret, maybe guilt. "I used to think he was just a weird old man with strange secrets," Corey sighed. "But now I know it was a carefully hidden nightmare." The interview didn't end with a plea for sympathy. Corey didn't tear himself apart. He simply chose the truth. "I should have spoken up sooner. It might have saved someone. It might have saved some of them." Corey added softly, "I can't undo what he did, but I won't stay silent anymore." In the days since the video's release, public opinion has shifted. Corey, the son once vilified for his silence, has become a courageous witness daring to confront his past. Families who once raged at his silence now see him differently, not as a complicit accomplice, but as the man who finally tore down the veil of truth. To millions, Rick Harrison embodied the American dream. Not born into wealth or raised in power, he started with a small pawn shop in downtown Las Vegas. With a sharp mind, natural charm, and a knack for turning dusty relics into treasures, he built a globally renowned empire. In 2009, when Pawn Stars debuted on the History Channel, that image was cemented more vividly than ever. The show wasn't just a TV program, it was a cultural phenomenon. Viewers didn't just watch antique deals, they saw a working-class family turn scrap into gold, laughing, learning, and making audiences feel part of every transaction. Rick, with his thinning hair and down-to-earth voice, became the heart of the pawn shop. Stern but fair, sharp but approachable, he could recount the tale of a Revolutionary War sword in one breath, then casually haggle over a vintage Pez dispenser. Americans loved him for his authenticity, or at least they believed it was authentic. Off-camera, Rick's influence stretched far beyond the pawn shop. As Pawn Stars exploded, he invested in ventures from real estate to quietly amassing rare historical artifacts, with rumors swirling of a private museum. Producers revealed Rick tightly controlled his image. Every joke, every line, every scene needed his approval. Rick wasn't just the star, he was the playwright of his own drama. And for a long time, that illusion worked. The pawn shop became an iconic destination, drawing tourists from around the globe. People lined up to meet the cast, buy branded t-shirts, mugs, or bobbleheads. Merchandise from the show flooded the market. Teachers brought students to meet Rick, the man who made history come alive. Fans from across the world flew to Las Vegas just to touch a piece of the dream Rick had built. Corey Harrison, known as Big Hoss, long walked a tightrope between family loyalty and inner rebellion. On screen, he was the son learning the ropes, occasionally clashing with his dad over business decisions. But off-screen, Corey grappled with the suffocating weight of fame, family expectations, and a nagging, unshakable feeling that his father was hiding something. "I always felt like there was another version of him," Corey shared in an interview. "When the cameras were on, he was Rick Harrison, charming, sharp, but when the lights went off, he was a completely different person." Signs of something off had surfaced long before Pawn Stars aired. According to former employees and close associates, Rick was always secretive. Business cards were rarely given out. His private office was practically a no-go zone. Accounting records were handwritten, never digitized. Certain deals, especially those with murky origins, were never discussed. "There were unwritten rules," a former employee revealed. "Some boxes weren't to be opened, some deals weren't recorded, and everyone knew it was best not to ask." Yet all these secrets were cleverly masked, leaving the public to see Rick as a symbol of success. Outside the pawn shop, Rick was hailed as a model entrepreneur. He spoke at schools, contributed to the community, and even lobbied in Washington on small business issues. No one questioned him until the secret auctions came to light. For years before his arrest, Rick allegedly held exclusive auctions at remote Nevada locations. No public announcements, no filming, no receipts. Only wealthy individuals, many from overseas, were invited. According to FBI reports, the items were highly unusual: fossilized tissue samples, body parts supposedly tied to historical figures, even human remains. Some were labeled Napoleonic, Maryland DNA, or unpublished Kennedy documents. The federal investigation revealed that most of these items were sophisticated fakes, designed to deceive collectors into paying millions. But what was more horrifying was that some items were real, sourced from places no one could fathom. Rick's obsession with history, once endearing, now exposed a twisted dark side, dragging his family and empire into a vortex of horrifying truth. A forensic psychologist at the trial clarified, for Rick, money wasn't the primary motive. Power was what he craved. Power to control history, to decide what was preserved and what was erased. The pawn shop was the perfect front. It opened doors to desperate sellers, rare items, and legal loopholes. The pawn shop didn't just conceal shady deals, it transformed Rick into a national TV icon, a beloved celebrity so trusted that no one questioned what happened behind closed doors. Corey Harrison, Rick's son, wasn't immune to the whirlwind. In the early years of Pawn Stars, Corey strove to prove himself, not just to the audience, but to his father. His eyes always carried a hunger for approval, but laced with moments of hesitation, fleeting glints of doubt that went unnoticed. "When I was younger, I never questioned him," Corey admitted. "I thought, he's my dad. He knows what he's doing, building a future for the family. Who wouldn't want to believe that?" But that trust began to crumble when Corey asked to see the business records and was flatly refused. On that fateful night, Corey stumbled upon a briefcase in Rick's SUV. Inside were dozens of black and white photos of human remains, arranged like works of art, with handwritten notes from Rick. That was the moment everything turned upside down. "I was scared," Corey recounted. "I didn't know if I was wrong. I didn't want to be wrong, but I didn't want to be right either." Corey didn't confront his father, didn't call the police, didn't tell anyone. Instead, he chose to live within that facade, smiling for the cameras, promoting the family brand, playing the perfect heir. But the shadow of that briefcase haunted him. Years later, when the FBI raided the pawn shop, Corey finally faced the full truth. At the trial, as the judge sentenced Rick to life in prison, Corey didn't cry. He sat there, arms crossed, lips tight, staring at the man who had once been everything to him. The man who took so much and left wounds that would never heal. The legend of Rick Harrison wasn't just a tale of a successful entrepreneur. It was a meticulously staged drama, leveraging family fame and a passion for history to conceal a dark truth. And it worked because we wanted to believe in a beautiful story, a charismatic figure, and the idea that every dusty item in the pawn shop held a mystery waiting to be uncovered. When Rick Harrison's mask was torn off, the only question left was, how deep did that darkness run? And how long were we, the audience, willing to ignore the truth to stay captivated by a compelling story? There's a moment in everyone's life when silence becomes an unbearable weight. For Corey Harrison, that moment didn't come with the FBI raids, the tense trial, or the judge's life sentence for his father. That moment came on a quiet night, after the cameras were gone, the headlines had faded, and the man he once called father was locked away for good. For years, Corey had kept secrets, hiding them behind the facade of family expectations, public image, and fear of abandonment. But the verdict was a blade that tore through the walls he'd built since childhood, exposing what he'd always avoided. Those close to Corey noticed him change gradually, not all at once, but like a zipper stretched too far, slowly coming undone. He showed up to the pawn shop later, stopped signing autographs for fans, and the bright spark in his eyes dimmed backstage. Corey grew paranoid, asking friends about curses, recording every call, sleeping with a loaded gun by his side, even in heavily guarded hotels. Though the media had moved on to new scandals, Corey remained trapped in memories, guilt, and an indelible truth. The final trigger wasn't an FBI report, a tip-off, or a leaked video. It was a letter, eerily ordinary. 2 weeks after Rick's sentencing, Corey received a handwritten note, the familiar scrawl hauntingly unmistakable, postmarked from Las Vegas. Inside was a single sheet. No greeting, no signature, just 5 words in smudged ink. I always knew, but I stayed silent. No explanation, no apology, just an accusation and a command. Corey sat for hours, staring at the paper, reading it over and over until the words blurred before his eyes. Then he tore it in half, then quarters, and kept tearing until the paper was nothing but inky dust in his hands. That night, Corey didn't sleep. The next morning, he picked up the phone and called Elijah Rhodes, an independent documentary filmmaker, a close friend who had captured rare behind-the-scenes moments of Pawn Stars in its early seasons. It was the first step in Corey breaking his silence, confronting the truth and telling the story he'd buried for too long. Elijah Rhodes wasn't just someone Corey trusted. He was one of the few who noticed cracks in the Harrison family's perfect facade. "It's time," Corey said, and they arranged to meet at a modest Airbnb in the Hollywood Hills, far from the city's noise. No film crew, no lights, just a single camera, a tripod, and an empty whiskey bottle on the table. Corey sat down, cleared his throat, and looked straight into the camera. For 57 uninterrupted minutes, he peeled away the silence that had taken root since his teenage years. He spoke of his first suspicion at 16, rummaging through the storage room after hours for old baseball cards. Instead of cards, he found a locked mini fridge. Inside, no soda or beer, just a sealed specimen jar floating in cloudy liquid with a dark mass and a label marked with a date and a strange string of numbers. Corey recalled a woman, matching the description of a local missing person, who had visited the shop weeks before the date on the jar. At first, he convinced himself it was just Rick's quirky taste for medical collectibles or maybe a prop. But the more he thought, the more pieces fit. Rick's late-night desert trips with discreet canvas bags, shipments through the back door without receipts, arguments with suited men who came and went, and the secret basement room, Rick's so-called archive, where everyone, even Corey, was forbidden to tread. Corey recalled one night, as an adult, when he mustered the courage to ask about that room. Rick just stared at him and said, "You don't want to know if you want to keep living like you do." Rick smiled, but Corey felt a chilling warning. From then on, he stopped asking. He buried his suspicions, playing the loyal son, too afraid to face a truth he wasn't ready for. "I was scared," Corey admitted to the camera. "Not just of what I might find, but of who I'd become if I kept digging. Once you know, there's no going back." Corey's silence wasn't just about protecting his family. It was about shielding himself from an abyss he didn't dare peer into. The night Corey read his father's letter, those 5 cold words, "I always knew, but I stayed silent," cut the final thread. Not just because of guilt, but because of years spent in a warped reality, smiling for the cameras while dying inside. Corey's confession on camera wasn't just an interview. It was a cleansing ritual, where he faced himself and the secrets that had imprisoned him for too long. Corey revealed he'd considered turning Rick in, even nearly hired a private investigator and kept a detailed log of every suspicious event, dates, names, photos, as a safeguard if things went south. "That journal is with the FBI now," he said. He admitted his complicity. "I knew something was wrong. Maybe I didn't know the whole truth, but I knew enough, and I chose silence. That's on me." But this time, Corey chose differently. "Silence isn't an option anymore. I won't protect someone who abused everyone's trust, used fame to hide the truth, and turned every handshake, every smile, every piece of history into a scam." The interview ended with Elijah's question, "What do you want people to take from this story?" Corey took a deep breath, eyes red, voice low. Monsters don't always look like monsters. Sometimes they wear your face, eat dinner with you, teach you to ride a bike or sell watches on TV, but they're still monsters. He stood, walked out of frame, and didn't look back. The footage wasn't meant for immediate release. Corey insisted it only be shared if more evidence surfaced. But his words leaked. Within 48 hours, snippets appeared online. First a quote, then a minute of video, and finally the full film, uploaded anonymously, racking up millions of views before being taken down. The truth had broken free, and Corey's life was forever changed. Documentary producers from Netflix, Hulu, and HBO reached out, offering book deals and TV shows. But Corey declined them all. He didn't want to profit from his confession. His focus now is aiding authorities in uncovering the remaining secrets, providing answers to families who've waited decades. Because in the end, it's not just Rick Harrison's crimes at stake, it's the system that enabled silence, making everything worse. In the end, Corey Harrison found the courage to shatter the wall of silence. The story unfolded at the Gold and Silver Pawn Shop, a famed tourist spot where visitors sought souvenirs, rare baseball cards, valuable antiques, and pieces of history. But beneath its glittering facade, the pawn shop hid secrets darker than any item on display. It all began with a locked door known as the back room. Employees joked it was where Rick kept his most valuable items, but few knew the truth behind it. Over the years, whispers grew louder. Staff reported strange occurrences, noises in the dead of night, items moved without explanation, and mysterious deliveries received after closing hours. An anonymous former employee described it. It was like watching a magic show. You saw what happened in front of you, but the backstage was completely hidden. Ask questions, and you were ignored. Ask again, and you were out of a job. Another employee revealed that Rick often received unlabeled packages with no shipping details. They arrived after hours, were taken straight to the back room, and never reappeared. These reports are now in the hands of federal investigators. Once, a package emitted such a strong chemical odor that 2 employees felt nauseous. When asked, Rick simply said, "It's preservative, don't open it." The Gold and Silver Pawn Shop wasn't just a store, it was a fortress. Private security systems, hidden vaults, and a basement off-limits to the public. The chilling part was how these strange behaviors became normal. Employees stopped questioning locked doors, stopped resisting the anomalies, and the bizarre became routine. Rick's authority in the shop was absolute. No board of directors, no external audits. The family business operated entirely on his terms. Rick didn't tolerate curiosity. A new security guard once tried to follow Rick to the basement after hearing loud machinery and the sound of something heavy being dragged, but he didn't get far. Rick stopped him halfway down the stairs, stared for a few seconds, and said, "You'll want to turn back, son." The next day, the guard was reassigned to valet parking for Corey with no explanation. The signs were always there, but Corey often ignored them. He recalled the first time he saw his father in a heated argument with a foreign man over an unregistered gun, or when Rick exploded after a collector accidentally opened a desk drawer in his office. Corey once tried accessing the business ledgers, but they were locked in a safe hidden behind a two-way mirror. Those moments of unease were just the surface of a far deeper secret. The most terrifying secret lay in a room Corey saw only once when he turned 25. Rick brought him in like a rite of passage. The door required 2 keys, one physical, one digital, and was guarded by a fingerprint sensor. Inside wasn't dusty or cluttered, but a sterile space with medical-grade glass shelves lining the walls, holding sealed containers. Some had barcodes, others handwritten dates. In the center stood a stainless steel table under a surgical light. The room was suffocatingly silent. No hum of equipment, no outside noise, just the faint whisper of filtered air. "What is this?" Corey asked. Rick smiled, closed the door, and replied, "This is where history waits." He offered no further explanation, but those words haunted Corey for years. Corey tried to convince himself it was an appraisal room, that the containers held valuable antiques, that the light was just for close inspection. But he couldn't shake the faint antiseptic smell that clung to his clothes after leaving. The more he thought about it, the more uneasy he felt. The room didn't feel like a place for preserving history. It felt like a cold, clinical lab hiding something horrific. When the FBI investigated, they uncovered a secret ledger Rick kept, never digitized or featured on Pawn Stars. Hidden in his personal locker, it didn't list coins or guitars, but bizarre entries. Bone marrow 1992, dental artifact 1217, shipment from Cairo. None had legal documentation, and the dates aligned with unsolved local disappearances occurring shortly after Rick received unmarked deliveries. An FBI agent described it as a sophisticated system to collect, preserve, and profit from human remains, masked as historical preservation. More chilling, some items had been auctioned to collectors who believed they were buying legitimate scientific artifacts. The secret in that room wasn't just Rick's crime. It was evidence he'd used the pawn shop to conceal a horrifying network. As the pawn shop's items were traced and examined, the results stunned everyone. Human remains, undocumented tissue, and genetic material linked to missing persons across 3 states. The gold and silver pawn shop, once a symbol of scrappy capitalism, was exposed as a gruesome archive, where the dead were traded like collectibles, their identities erased, their stories reduced to numbers in a secret ledger. Employees who spoke out after the scandal described a stifling environment of silence and intimidation. "You didn't ask questions," a longtime worker shared. "Everyone knew there were things you didn't touch, topics you didn't mention. Follow the rules, and you were paid well. Step out of line, and you were gone." Some employees revealed they had to sign NDAs with unusual clauses referencing national security interests and protection of archaeological materials. At the time, they thought it was just legal formality, but now suspect it was a way to legitimize the cover-up. Rick used his fame to silence those who got too close to the truth. A local historian once questioned an artifact she suspected was looted from a Middle Eastern burial site. Within a month, she lost her university grant, was erased from academic publications, and received a complaint letter accusing her of falsifying credentials. Metadata traced the letter to an IP address linked to Rick's office. Anyone who dared challenge Rick disappeared from the game. The most damning evidence was a video found in a safe beneath the shop, requiring a code and biometric scan to access. It showed Rick leading two strangers into the secret room, holding a wrapped object nearly the size of a human torso. The footage cut off after less than 10 minutes. When it resumed, the two strangers were gone, and Rick was alone, wiping the table with a rag soaked in dark liquid. Investigators used the video to cross-reference missing persons reports and international trafficking activities, unveiling a horrifying truth. The pawn shop wasn't just a business, it was a front concealing an unspeakable criminal network. The evidence in that secret video is absolutely mind-blowing. But the question is, what does this really mean for the people involved? We want to hear your take on this shocking footage. What do you think is the real story behind the scenes? Let us know in the comments below. And if you want to stay updated on the latest shocking revelations, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Corey later shared that when he stepped into the room with its specimen jars and dim lighting, he felt a part of himself change forever. "I knew I couldn't go back," he said. The room didn't just hold Rick's secrets. It was the line between innocence and the brutal truth Corey was forced to face. Special Agent Marissa Kint, a veteran in tracking organized crime and international smuggling, had never encountered a case like this. One night, she received a call from an anonymous source claiming to be a private courier for Rick Harrison. The trembling voice described unlabeled crates, untraceable cash payments, and late-night deliveries to temperature-controlled storage facilities on the outskirts of Las Vegas. Then the caller uttered 5 words that sent a chill through Kint. There were bodies in the crates. At first, Kint thought it might be a hoax from a disgruntled ex-employee. But the caller provided precise details, receipt codes, storage unit serial numbers, and a description of a crate mistakenly opened, revealing a preserved human body, mummified in a sealed glass case, labeled with a date and an unfamiliar barcode. The next morning, Kint filed an urgent request for a search warrant. Within 48 hours, the FBI launched a massive investigation, uncovering a truth far beyond imagination. The FBI uncovered 7 storage facilities, all registered under a front company, Harrison Asset Protection, LLC. The paperwork led to a P.O. box in Reno and a chain of ghost offices with no staff or legitimate operations. Inside each facility was a labyrinth of metal shelves, sealed crates, and locked freezers. The first unit contained meticulously preserved human remains, vacuum-sealed in industrial plastic, each piece labeled with cryptic codes like RH47V21Me03. The codes were initially cryptic, but the FBI soon realized they belonged to a cataloging system Rick had developed over years. Each code logged the acquisition date, location, and dubious historical value. This system wasn't just for tracking inventory. It was evidence of a sophisticated criminal network where human remains were stored, traded, and sold under the guise of historical preservation. Kint's investigation exposed a horrifying truth, transforming the pawn shop from a cultural icon into the epicenter of a nightmare. The crates in Rick's storage facilities were marked with cryptic references like Egyptian Coptic Kennedy bread sample, Tra-3, or unverified Roman relic, paired with notes on dates, locations, and phrases like client notified or store in cold vault. At first glance, the space resembled a museum with clinical order. But as the FBI dug deeper, they uncovered hundreds of Polaroids, digital photos, and negatives documenting human remains staged like exhibits. Dressed in replica military uniforms, posed with World War II medals, Renaissance goblets, or 1920s prohibition signs. Some photos showed remains altered post-autopsy, like a skeleton draped in velvet on a throne resembling Louis XIV's, or an infant's body in a glass jar labeled "client gift, not for display." These weren't just relics. They were perverse exhibitions, curated for an unknown audience. Agents shuddered, realizing what they uncovered wasn't merely crime, but a warped obsession with reconstructing history through human corpses. In the second and third storage units, the FBI found hundreds of handwritten notebooks filled with meticulous details on blood types, decomposition rates, pH levels, and tissue preservation techniques. The notes referenced reconstruction rituals and failed attempts at cryogenic storage. These weren't just scientific logs. They were Rick's personal diaries, chronicling his descent into an underworld where pseudoscience and human exploitation collided. Each notebook was time-stamped, starting in 1993, marking a decades-long, perverse journey. The fourth storage unit, secured by biometric scanning, was the most horrific discovery. After breaching it with help from the Justice Department, the FBI uncovered the largest unauthorized collection of human biological specimens in U.S. history. Inside were intact bodies, some dissected and categorized by bone groups. Glass tanks held corpses preserved in clear gel, showing no signs of decay. One tank contained conjoined twins, partially dissected. Another held a man in a fetal position, wires protruding from his skull like an abandoned experiment. These discoveries didn't just expose Rick's crimes. They revealed a depraved system where humans were commodified, staged, and preserved like historical artifacts. The pawn shop wasn't just a front. It was the hub of a criminal network beyond imagination, leaving the FBI and Corey grappling with an indelible, horrifying truth. In the storage facility, the FBI found an encrypted server rack holding terabytes of data, including videos of Rick Harrison. One, dated June 15, 2004, showed Rick standing at a stainless steel table, describing a corpse as one of the cleanest acquisitions I've ever processed. He calmly discussed organ removal, preservative injections, and anatomical adjustments to match the era. His academic yet chilling tone unnerved agents. The forensic team spent weeks cross-referencing DNA, identifying at least 38 sets of remains, victims aged 9 to 64, missing since 1997, not all linked to the pawn shop. The FBI hasn't confirmed, but seized documents suggest Rick was part of a global black market network where collectors paid millions for relics tied to fabricated historical narratives. Theories about Rick's motives range from human trafficking to illegal anatomy to cult-like obsession. Names and addresses in the documents are under investigation, revealing a cross-border criminal web involving international smugglers and unethical collectors. The 5th and 6th units held not only human remains but also cultural artifacts stolen from conflict zones. 3,000-year-old Egyptian Coptic jars, a Sumerian stone tablet with untranslated cuneiform, Nazi insignia and weapons, including a rifle missing from a Berlin WO2 museum. A mummified hand wrapped in linen inscribed with ancient Aramaic was also found. These items, reported missing for years, now sat under fluorescent lights, proving Rick's crimes violated global cultural heritage. The 7th unit made agents hesitate. The air was frigid and heavy, with a crimson Victorian leather chair centered in the room like a stage. In front of it stood a camera on a tripod and a microphone wired to the chair's back, suggesting a perverse recording setup. No historical notes accompanied it, but the scene was logged in the FBI report, haunting every agent present. No one dared speculate on the room's purpose, but it was a testament to the warped depths of Rick's mind. After the raid, a federal forensic team spent 3 months cataloging and disposing of evidence. Documents were sealed and shipped to facilities across the U.S. A special archive, managed by the FBI, Interpol, and the Smithsonian, was established to continue the investigation. The pawn shop wasn't just a business. It was the hub of an international criminal network, twisting history into a tool for exploitation and horror, leaving an indelible stain on those who uncovered the truth. Rick Harrison is currently in custody, refusing to answer questions. His legal team has only issued a no-comment statement. However, sources from the Justice Department reveal Rick has hinted at writing a detailed account of his collection, claiming the public won't understand without the full story. Some believe he aims to use a memoir to negotiate humane detention conditions or access to a psychiatric facility. Others think he simply wants to leave a final manifesto in the wake of the raid. The public reels between shock and outrage. Protests erupted outside the gold and silver pawn shop, now permanently shuttered. Former fans demand answers, victims' families file civil lawsuits, and Congress holds emergency hearings on regulating human remains in private collections. The most horrifying revelation is that these crimes unfolded in plain sight for decades, cloaked by a hit reality TV show, hidden behind smiles and captivating deals, only exposed when an anonymous whistleblower spoke out. The FBI hasn't disclosed the whistleblower's identity, but Corey Harrison believes he knows who it is, a figure hiding in the opulent, secluded corners of Las Vegas. This person, Corey claims, may hold the key to unraveling the entire criminal network, but remains beyond the reach of the public and investigators for now. Behind iron gates, high fences, and security cameras, Rick Harrison's estate resembled the lavish mansion of a typical millionaire TV star. Towering walls, desert landscaping, and a sprawling garage crafted a perfect illusion. But inside, a different story emerged. The initial search warrant targeted assets tied to the pawn shop, but notes from the storage facilities and personal diaries led the FBI to realize they needed to dig deeper. On a quiet Wednesday morning, a convoy of unmarked SUVs rolled into the neighborhood. Agents, accompanied by a tactical strike team and a court order, didn't knock. If the storage facilities had exposed Rick's secrets, the estate might conceal something far worse. The house, with its imported marble floors, Italian furnishings, and cutting-edge electronics, seemed unremarkable at first. But themed display rooms, a Civil War-style parlor, a study lined with Cold War propaganda, a library stuffed with books on secret societies and occult philosophy, revealed Rick's obsession wasn't just with history, but with a much darker world. No one called it criminal, just eccentric quirkiness, until FBI agents reached the wine cellar. The entrance was hidden behind a temperature-controlled glass wall where dozens of expensive wine bottles sat neatly on wooden racks. But one bottom rack held a secret. When removed, a biometric scanner emerged, glowing in the dark. Rick's fingerprints, unsurprisingly, were already in the system, as if he knew this day would come. The sliding door opened, revealing not a wine cellar, but a spiral staircase descending underground. The air was bone-chillingly cold, sterile white light bathing everything, as if they'd entered a separate world. Each footstep echoed, but no sound from the outside penetrated. The silence was suffocating, broken only by the agent's breathing. This subterranean vault was a different reality, where Rick held his secrets. At the staircase's end was a dark hallway with 3 doors. 2 were locked tight, immovable, but the third was ajar, leading to a chilling space. The first room was a state-of-the-art lab filled with razor-sharp surgical tools, microscopes, and jars of unidentified organic material. On the walls hung anatomical charts, interspersed with bizarre sketches blending human forms with alchemical symbols, like the nightmare of a mad scientist. A bulletin board was plastered with photos of victims, from vibrant to decayed, paired with scrawled autopsy notes. One red phrase stood out, circled, "Eyes must remain intact to preserve memory." Nearby, a bookshelf overflowed with videotapes, each labeled with dates and names. One marked Corey, 5/17/2005, drew attention. Its contents remained classified, but it was enough to confirm. Rick didn't just document his crimes, he surveilled those around him. The second room was a living nightmare. The walls were lined with 2-way mirrors, later confirmed by engineers as intentional design. At the center stood an antique dental chair with restraints, the floor stained with dried fluid. A decorated veteran agent couldn't stomach it, turning away to vomit. The air felt heavy, as if the victim's pain still lingered. Here, they found diaries filled with cryptic symbols and repetitive phrases like a curse. "They remember down to their marrow, and the vessel must know its role," appeared repeatedly, like an obsessive mantra. These writings weren't just notes, but a manifesto of a mind that had crossed the line of sanity, dragging everything into its darkness. The third door was the final challenge, requiring both a code and a retinal scan. No one wanted to open it, but they had no choice. After hours of attempting to breach it, the door remained sealed, as if guarding Rick's ultimate secret. What lay beyond, no one dared guess, but the truth waited, cold and merciless. When the third door finally opened, a blast of frigid air poured out, as if the room itself were breathing. The temperature inside was brutal, both freezing and searing, making agents shudder. The 40-foot chamber, carved deep into the earth, was encased in thick, lead-lined walls, completely cut off from the world above. One wall shimmered with glass shelves displaying grotesque specimens: polished human skulls, arms preserved in solution, and vertebrae arranged neatly like trophies. At the room's center stood 6 cylindrical tanks, nearly 2 meters tall, filled with clear liquid glowing under internal lights. In each tank, a body floated, eyes open wide, vacant yet haunting. Children, adults, men, and women, each bearing identifying marks, tattoos, scars, or jewelry linked to missing persons reports across the U.S. The agents stood frozen, the air so heavy it pressed against their chests. Among the tanks, objects floated: keys, rings, handwritten notes, sealed bags. They could be mementos or trophies of a predator. In the 5th tank, a woman's body with visibly broken ribs hovered, and on the glass, a faint message materialized in the condensation, scrawled by a trembling finger: "She wants to go home." The plea was a knife, slicing through the room's silence. The tanks weren't connected to the house's power, but ran on an independent underground generator, ensuring they functioned even if the world above collapsed. An engineer later told the press, "This was a sophisticated cryogenic facility, impossible for a serene mansion. Everything was illegal, from storing human remains and biological tissue to unauthorized research and hazardous material risks." But the true horror was Rick's purpose. He wasn't just preserving bodies, he was preserving stories. Each tank came with a file detailing not the victims' real identities, but fictional personas Rick invented. A man was described as a Munich clockmaker. A woman was the keeper of Alexandria's secrets. A child became the prophet of 2045. None matched actual records, as if Rick was rewriting their lives to claim them. Rick's behavior, forensic psychiatrists concluded, was a manifestation of a rare syndrome: delusional hoarding. He was obsessed with recording, controlling, and mythologizing reality, turning people into characters, objects into relics, and pain into history. For Rick, this wasn't just about committing crimes, it was about creating a world of his own, where everything belonged to his story. The psychological diagnosis of Rick did little to ease the pain of the victims' families, who now had to confront a brutal truth. Outside the compound, authorities established a security perimeter for 2 weeks, sealing off the site as if it were a federal crime scene. Medical examiners worked around the clock, testing DNA from horrifying samples. Evidence was collected, key interviews were sealed, yet the horror lingered, unanswered and unresolved. Corey, the reluctant witness, was placed under special protection. He remained silent. No tears, no words, just stood still at the top of the stairs leading down to the basement, staring into the darkness. Then he uttered a single sentence, cold and haunting: "I knew there was something under the house." That statement echoed through investigative reports, court documents, and media coverage, becoming a bitter catchphrase, as if fate itself had long foretold the truth. What Rick Harrison built beneath the mansion wasn't a shelter. It was a temple. Not one that honored history, but one that worshipped his own twisted world. For over a decade, the public knew Corey Harrison from Pawn Stars, an impulsive but likable guy, always joking around with Chumley or arguing with his stern father behind the counter of a Las Vegas pawn shop. But the Corey who walked into this interview today was no longer that familiar face. The studio was cold, just a single camera, a lone overhead light. No makeup, no production crew, only Corey. He sat there, shoulders tense, hands resting on his thighs, his gaze heavy. The bright smile and easy charm that once defined him were gone, replaced by a weariness, a fragility, as if the truth had drained the life from him. The interviewer, Elijah Rhodes, longtime friend and filmmaker, understood that sometimes silence speaks louder than any question. The first question came, simple but sharp as a blade. When did you realize your father wasn't the man everyone thought he was? Corey didn't answer right away. He lowered his head, eyes fixed on the floor, fingers locked tightly together. After a long pause, he spoke, his voice low and unsteady. There's no clear moment like in the movies, where you discover the monster and everything falls apart overnight. He took a deep breath, then continued. It's the little things. They build up over the years. You try to ignore them, but one day they pile so high you can't see anything else but the truth. He paused, his gaze distant, as if searching through his memories. The first time I really felt something was wrong was when I was 16, just starting to work full-time at the pawn shop, he said. Corey's untold story now began to emerge. A raw, unvarnished confession about the cracks in the image of the father he had once admired. My dad gave me the key to the storage room behind the pawn shop. Not the regular stock room, but the place where they kept old records, unsold inventory, and appraisal documents. I thought I'd be sorting through junk, maybe stumble on something interesting. But instead, I found a filing cabinet, chained shut, cold. Mysterious Elijah's camera might not have captured the slight tremble in the lens as he adjusted focus, but the audience would feel the tension. The moment I froze, heart pounding in my chest. I picked the lock, I confess, I said, my voice trembling. Teenage curiosity, you understand? Inside were dozens of photos, black and white, Polaroids, none of them looking posed, unfamiliar faces, but a few I recognized. Regulars who had visited the shop years ago. All of them still, eyes wide open, lifeless, as if looking right through me. I closed my eyes, trying to shake the image away. I shut the cabinet, locked it again, and never asked Dad about it. That was the first time I chose to bury the truth. Years later, the doubts resurfaced. Mysterious packages arrived after closing time, always through the back door, no barcodes, no receipts, just silent boxes. Sometimes I heard them being pushed into the storage room, but I didn't dare open them. Then the arguments started. My father met with strange men in closed-door meetings. They didn't seem like collectors or antique dealers. No laughter, just a sharp tension. Dad changed. His eyes became distant, as if hiding an unshareable secret. Elijah asked why I hadn't spoken up sooner. I replied, my voice firm but bitter. Because he's Rick Harrison. The whole world loves him. If I had said something, I would have been seen as the crazy son, destroying the family. No one would have believed me, and I didn't want to believe it myself. I leaned forward, my voice slowing down as if each word were a knife. I was afraid the truth would destroy everything. Not just the family, but me too. Elijah continued, his voice low but sharp. How did you feel when you saw what the FBI found? The tubs, the notes, the tapes? I hesitated, my throat tightening. Relieved, I said, and the room fell silent. Not ashamed or guilty, but pure relief. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't imagining things. It was all real. The monsters I had thought only existed in my head turned out to have been in the basement all these years. But that relief didn't last. Guilt washed over me soon after. I should have said something sooner, I whispered. Maybe someone would still be alive if I had been brave enough. Then I told him about the letter. It arrived 3 days after Dad was sentenced. No return address, just 5 short words etched into my mind. I didn't read them aloud, but they lingered like a curse, a reminder that the truth, even exposed, hadn't set me free. You always knew, no explanation needed, the letter read. I looked directly into the camera, my heart heavy. I knew it was from him. The confession came out, sharp and cold. I couldn't stay silent any longer. When Elijah asked if I believed Rick was remorseful, I answered immediately, without hesitation. No, I think he's proud. That sentence landed like a punch, silencing viewers across America. It shattered the image of the father they had come to love through the screen. Rick Harrison wasn't a lost soul, as I had once hoped. According to me, he was someone who chose that path, deliberately. The recording, the preservation of bodies, the meticulous arrangement of everything weren't the actions of a chaotic mind, but of someone obsessed with order. For him, it was a mission to preserve history, I explained, my voice bitter. He often said, "We're not collectors. We're storytellers." But I never imagined he would apply that literally, in such a horrifying and twisted way. Elijah played a recovered tape. Rick's voice echoed, calm and cold. We shape the narrative. We decide who matters. I shuddered, feeling pulled back to my days at the pawn shop. I've heard that voice my whole life, I said, when he talked about customers, about artifacts. I never thought it meant this. His words, once familiar, now felt like a curse. Regarding the public's reaction, the fans, the media, and even former co-stars, I didn't shy away. They have a right to be angry, I said. People turned on their TVs, welcomed us into their homes, but they were deceived. What they saw was an illusion, carefully constructed, and I was a part of it. That confession felt like rubbing salt in a wound, but I couldn't escape the truth. My family had been living a lie. Elijah asked what I wanted to say to the victims' families. I choked up, tears welling in my eyes. I'm sorry. Truly sorry. I can't comprehend their pain. I saw the signs, but I stayed silent, thinking I was imagining things. My voice broke. I can't change what he did, but I swear I won't be silent anymore. The facade was gone, leaving only a broken man, held captive by the darkness for too long. In the final 10 minutes, I shared my journey of healing. The therapy sessions, using the remaining money to help identify victims, funding forensic analysis, and establishing a memorial fund. I don't need a redemption story, I said. I need accountability. When Elijah asked what I would say if Rick watched the interview, I looked at the camera, silent for a long moment, then whispered, "I'm not your son anymore." The shot faded out, leaving a heavy silence. The interview caused a media storm, but instead of criticism, the public responded with empathy. The image of Corey, no longer the fun-loving guy from Pawn Stars but a man confronting the truth, gave many people pause. Even so, the pain of the victims' families and the darkness from the underground vault remained haunting, like a scar that would never fully heal. For the first time since the scandal, Corey Harrison was no longer seen as a silent accomplice, but as a survivor, breaking free from the toxic legacy hidden beneath the Harrison family's glamorous facade. His interview went viral, reaching over 50 million views in just a few days. News channels broadcast it non-stop, and victim support groups lauded Corey's testimony as a courageous act, tearing down the wall of lies that had concealed the crimes. Many of the victims' families sent letters to Corey. Not all offered forgiveness, but most acknowledged his courage. Meanwhile, Corey chose silence, not about the truth, but about his personal fame. He declined all exclusive interviews, turned down all media invitations, and donated any compensation to the identified victims' families. For him, justice wasn't just about the court's verdict, but about bringing the truth to light, giving a voice back to those who had been silenced. For Corey, the victims weren't just names in a file. They were families, indelible memories, he had said in the interview. His confession achieved what the verdict couldn't. It gave a voice to the lost, turning pain into a vow to never be silent again. His actions weren't just about atonement, but a promise etched into the hearts of those who had once believed in the Harrison family. Pawn Stars wasn't just a TV show. It was a part of millions of people's memories. Viewers didn't just tune in for the antiques, the historical anecdotes, or the banter between Rick, Corey, Chumlee, and the late Richard Harrison. They came for a sense of familiarity, as if the pawn shop were a second family, a place where history came alive in a warm space. Each week, audiences stepped into that world, believing they knew the people behind the counter. But when the truth broke, Rick sentenced to life in prison, the FBI revealing storage units containing human remains and his dark obsession, that trust shattered. The feeling of betrayal was like a knife to the hearts of fans. Initially, many refused to believe it, dismissing it as fake news or a publicity stunt. But the undeniable evidence, the audio tapes, the testimonies, the federal indictment, extinguished all hope. Corey's interview was the spark that ignited the collapse of the Pawn Stars legacy in just a few hours. The fan community descended into chaos. Forums, once filled with laughter and debates about antiques, were now flooded with outrage and grief. One viral social media post read, "My dad and I watched Pawn Stars every Sunday night for 10 years. It was our ritual. I used to dream of visiting the pawn shop with him. Now just the thought makes me sick." On Reddit, the Pawn Stars subreddit was so overwhelmed that moderators had to temporarily lock new posts to prevent a system crash. Headlines like, "How could I not have seen it?" haunted every news site, reflecting the heartbreak of those who had once loved the show. Wow, what a revelation. Corey Harrison's shocking words have left us all questioning the untold truths behind the scenes of Pawn Stars. What do you think about this explosive confession? Could there be more hidden stories we don't know about? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We want to hear from you. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more jaw-dropping updates on your favorite stars. Stay tuned, because you won't want to miss what's coming next. Thanks for watching.